here she comes. Okay.
Ashley, I need to fix my microphone. I'll be there in just a second.
Okay.
I need to fix my
3 is hard.
microphone. Give me a minute. Hold on.
So we are all here.
You guys are live?
Liz changed your computer location.
Yeah.
Yeah, she said she got new internet all worked out so she could be in a quieter, pet-free room.
There's a plus to that.
Yeah. All right, I think we're just waiting for Mary to get her microphone fixed up here. So we'll give her a couple minutes and then I think everyone else is here.
I'm just checking in to see how your feed is looking today. I'm just QA/QC for a little bit.
Yeah, it sounds good. I can hear everyone really clearly in the boardroom. Even Sheila's all the way in the corner there. I can hear her great.
Sheila, talk a little bit.
Greg's over here too.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So we have microphones in the ceiling from the Zoom room.
Oh,
So there's,
great.
yeah, 2
There's
omnidirectional
Jim.
mics. That was not social distancing.
Oh, good. You'll be good.
All right, I'm gonna leave you guys. Leave you alone. See you later.
All right, thanks, Tom.
Wants to go.
You are live right now.
You are live. Like I've ever cared.
All right, we're just waiting for, oh, I think Mary
I'm
maybe.
here.
Much better? Okay.
Oh, great.
All right, so being just a minute late, I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. Dana, can we do a roll call, please, for attendance?
Member Selman,
Here.
Member Hart,
Here.
Member Healy,
Here.
Member Noonan,
Here.
Member Ozak. Member
Mute.
Ozak,
No, you're muted, Mary.
Here. Sorry.
All right.
Member Rutledge.
Here.
All right, we've got everybody. Good morning. I want to thank all the members of this committee as well as members of county staff who helped us get ready for this morning's discussion. The question of how to organize ourselves as citizens in order to receive representation for our views and proper spending of our tax dollars is one which dates back to the very founding of our nation. In the over 240 years since the creation of our republic, we are still working to craft the elusive, more perfect union at every level of government. Today, DuPage County has the opportunity to set aside time to specifically deliberate, question, and gather data in order to assess this essential question. Surely there is no magic answer, rather a weighing of pros and cons of each proposal and what they would mean for our body and for our residents. The Regional Institute at the University of Buffalo studied this issue in the context of New York State government, and their conclusion feels applicable to today's topic. In relation to determining an ideal size of government, the report states, if the number and breadth of local government functions are broad, the difficulty of issues high, and the workload is heavy, then a larger legislature will provide more heads in hands than a smaller legislature, and thus more capable of completing the work. However, if the proportional cost per legislator is high, the scope of local government narrow, and the stakes of legislative decision-making relatively low, then a smaller legislature may be just as effective as a larger one. While not offering a clear conclusion, I think this statement gets the topic at the heart of today's discussion. It is up to us to collect the information that allows us to weigh which size of our body best provides the best representation for our residents. Excuse me. Today we will hear a staff presentation from John Nelson, and then we will have a discussion. Out of today's conversation, I'd like direction from the committee on 2 items. The first is the schedule for our follow-up conversations, keeping in mind the July board schedule and our deadline from Chairman Croman of July 31st for our findings. Second, I would like to use today's meeting to gather any and all follow-up questions and areas for further investigation by staff. This will allow us to gather as much information based on today's committee input as possible, while still meeting the quick timeline before us. Thank you, and with that, we'll move on to any public comment if we have any today.
We do have some public comment today. Can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I'll start with the one that's on top. It's from Mike Johnson. The usual way from Addison Township Democratic Organization in Bensonville. It's regarding reducing the number of county board seats. It states, I would like to go on record as opposing the reduction of county board seats. I'm in favor of more democracy, not less. I believe that effective leaders create more economic activity and generate far more revenue than they cost. I believe that we need to include representation from diverse backgrounds. Fewer seats equals less inclusion. I believe we are in the midst of an unprecedented economic catastrophe. How many tenants have been unable to pay rent? How many landlords can't pay their bills and mortgages? COVID continues to keep businesses closed or sub-capacity, and without intervention, how many will close permanently and file for bankruptcy? Think of the small businesses owned by baby boomers who count on selling their operations as part of their retirement plan. They're going to be hard pressed to find buyers in this market. I've also heard that corporate debt has ballooned since the Great Recession and is at risk of causing a chain reaction of defaults in the coming months. And so I hope that this committee agrees with me that while fewer votes to win a motion might make it easier to pass an agenda, when trouble hits DuPage County and there aren't enough hours in the day to do what needs to be done, we'll benefit from a full board of trustees as inclusive and diverse as the constituency they represent. That concludes his comment. Second comment is from Edgar Pal, PAL. It's about the county board size working group. Comment states, first, I'd like to congratulate you all on your appointments to this working group. I'm glad that Chairman Cronin agreed to form a working group to address this important topic. Second, I'd like to commend Mr. Nelson for an excellent memo that was posted on the agenda packet for this meeting. I found it to be very thorough and well-researched. As I stated to the county board last week, the scope of the working group should not be limited only to the board size. Rather, you should also consider the number of districts that the county should have and the number of members that should represent each district. McHenry County recently asked voters, shall the number of county board members be reduced from the current 24 members following the 2020 decennial census? While I applaud McHenry County for making that suggestion, the referendum question seems too vague. The board was going to decrease in size from 24 to what? 20, 18, 12? Would the districts be of the same size as before? There simply wasn't enough information presented to voters. I urge the working group to make a thorough, detailed recommendation for the upcoming referendum. A few days ago, I sent the working group links to several references that I found online. Most of the research that I presented suggests that county board sizes are usually smaller, less than 10 members. By that standard, the DuPage County Board would have to be cut in half to align with the majority of counties throughout the nation. On the other hand, counties in Wisconsin have large county boards, some having over 30 members. Both Douglas and Price counties considered reducing the size of their boards, but cited a study by the Wisconsin Taxpayer Alliance that concluded that larger board sizes correlated with lower county spending. However, county boards in Wisconsin are not directly comparable to Illinois counties because the duties generally assigned to county board members, the availability of paid county staff, and whether the county board chooses to hire a county administrator. Because DuPage County hires a lot of paid staff to support the board and its committees, you need not follow Wisconsin's model of having large board sizes. Having said that, it's intriguing that Wisconsin Taxpayer Alliance found that a board member, quote, with fewer constituents is held more accountable by the taxpayers, close quote. This would support my suggestion that DuPage County should have smaller districts. If the county were divided into more than 6 districts, then board members would have fewer constituents, which would lead to more accountability. That concludes Mr. Powell's comment. The last comment is from Kate Treadway in Lombard. It's regarding Pete DeCiani. The comment states, on Saturday, June 27th, 2020, Pete DeCiani can be seen in a video at a Back the Blue event screaming in all capitals at young people who had gathered there to peacefully read the names of Black lives lost at the hands of police. Not only was he screaming emotionally and aggressively, he was doing so without a mask. He's the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee for DuPage County. The governor has mandated masks after research shows they prevent the spread of COVID, and he is at a public rally without one. This is unacceptable, and the board needs to issue a censure on his behavior. After this deplorable incident, a constituent of DeCiani's contacted him by email to express her disappointment in him, parenthetically an elected official, close parents, and to tell him of her feelings about the incident as a person of color. His response to her was to quote, shove you sick vote up your ass, close quote. It's completely unacceptable as an elected official responding to his constituent. He's gotten far too comfortable and thinks the public is not watching him and that he doesn't need to conduct himself like a professional. Not anymore. We are watching and anxiously awaiting 2022 and Mr. DeCiani can be voted out. Until then, it is vital that the board issue a censure in this behavior as well. That concludes Ms. Treadway's comment. That's all the public comment I have present.
All right, thank you, Connor. And there's no one else in the room, correct?
No one but staff.
Okay, great. Okay, so the next item on our agenda then is staff presentation and discussion. With that, I'll leave it to John Nelson.
Okay. Thank you, Member Solomon. I'm going to share my screen here because I have a PowerPoint. In discussing our program with Member Selman, we thought it would be best to do a PowerPoint presentation. Can everybody see both in the Zoom and in person?
Mhm.
Okay, so by way of background for this issue, the county board has been discussing this issue, whether to reduce the size of the county board for some time. Currently, members, as you know, are elected throughout the county in 6 districts, with 3 members being elected from each district for a total board size of 18. The chairman created this working group so that we can all discuss what kind of issues might arise from the options that we have been discussing the last couple of weeks, whether to maintain the current 6 districts with 3 members each district, or whether to move to 2 members in each of the 6 districts. Whatever the decision the county board makes, this is going to be part of the redistricting process. This is something that comes up once every 10 years under state statute, particularly the county code. Statute requires that in reapportioning in its county, the county board shall first determine the size of the county board elected. In the packet, one of the appendixes, one of the attachments was the 2011 resolution, which you can see the first action item was to, and I'll pull this out as well. The first action item was to set the size of the county board. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the county board, the following reapportionment plan is hereby adopted, that the size of the county board shall be 18 members. There shall be 6 districts with 3 members in each district, and that the chairman of the county board shall be elected by the voters of the county pursuant to the county's code. So statute allows between 5 and 29 members elected to county boards in Illinois. However, there's a special law that was passed in Springfield in the 2000 legislature, capping DuPage at 18. And throughout this PowerPoint, we'll see how DuPage County aligns with other township counties in Illinois for membership size. We are elected, our members are elected in multi-member districts. And in consultation with Connor McCarthy, we would have to keep or maintain multi-member districts because the Illinois Constitution prohibits counties from moving to single-member districts from their current multi-member district structure without a binding referendum. An advisory referendum can be initiated by ordinance from the county board. This was brought up in some previous meetings. The county board can place this question not less than 79 days before the next election. So that would be the first county board meeting in August, which would be the deadline to submit an advisory referendum question on this issue. So the process, just a recap, this is part of the apportionment process. In the first election cycle that will use whatever map, whatever structure, size of the county board that we do end up adopting, that will be for the 2022 elections for the county board. So our goal here is to determine the number of members and the number of districts with numbers of members for each district. We will have to have a report by the end of the month, July 31st. So looking for a little bit of consensus or direction from the working group on that.
Member Selman, do you mind if I ask a question now, or would you like us to wait until John finishes?
Sorry, I was muted. Please go ahead and ask a question now.
Real quick, difference between the advisory and the binding referendum. I know you mentioned, John, that we can't reduce the number of people representing each district, or the number of representatives.
Single versus.
Yeah, we can't go to single or at large because we have multi-member districts.
Is the process different for a binding referendum, Connor?
By process, do you mean the process by which one enacts it, or?
Yeah, enacted. Like, does our board have the power to do a binding referendum?
Yes, your board could place a binding referendum on the ballot. It would obviously, and it would require that the board comply with that binding referendum. In fact, I think that's the only, I'll have to look. There's a League of Peoria Women Voters case from the Supreme Court back in the 80s where they tried to do this as a citizen initiative, and they tried to both reduce the number of the county board and move it to, I believe, single member districts. And I believe the Supreme Court said that they could do a citizen initiated referendum to do the single member districts, but they couldn't set the number of districts or the number of the county board. So it's kind of a convoluted system with regards to that. The board can do it all, but the board can only do it all with regards to reducing the number of districts or boundaries during the reapportionment period as set forth by statute.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds good. Okay, so this is the survey of Illinois counties that staff had conducted. These are the counties under township form of government and with more than 100,000 population. As you can see, a lot of counties do it differently. Some have single member districts, some have multi-member districts. Some have, I think the largest I saw was 29 members, and Kendall County is on the low end of the spectrum with 10 members. They also range in number of districts. Macon has 7 districts, and then Will County has 13, 2 members each district. The average number, when you combine all of these, is about 22.75 members, 22, 23 members for each of the county board in these counties. Looking at comparable counties through NACO, we looked at Hennepin County, Fairfax County, Virginia, Franklin County, Ohio, Bergen County, New Jersey, Gwinnett County, Georgia, Erie County, New York. Counties throughout the country have done this a little bit differently than Illinois. It looks like, at least through all these counties that I looked at, a lot less county board members. I believe there's one yet. Franklin, Ohio only had 3 county board members. They're elected at large. Similarly, the duties and responsibilities for some of these counties were a little bit more than what Illinois counties provide for. Some of these counties provided for the library system, the park districts. Illinois, we have special schools, right? In Illinois, we have separate districts for those. So a couple of aspects when we were doing our research that we saw that we should bring up to your attention, one of which is conducting meetings. As you know, right now, under the Open Meetings Act of state law, meetings of public bodies must be open to the public, and with an 18-member county board district or county board map, a quorum is 10. A meeting occurs when only 6 of those, a majority of the 10, are present. That would go down to 4 members present.
You know, whether it's a censure or something, you know. But
Member Chaplin, we can hear you. Member Chaplin, yeah. Sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
Sounds good. So that's just something to be cognizant of when conducting county board business. If there's attendance issues, we might not be able to, with a 12-member board, get through county board business. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there. Let me go back. There. Another detail is the size of county board committees. Right now, under the county board rules, each committee has 1/3 of the county board. If we did that with 12 members, there would just have to be some type of restructuring, because then we couldn't maintain 1/3 of the county board for each committee while still having 1 member from each district, at least under the current 6 districts. And JPS that's 2/3 of the committee or 2/3 of the county board under the county board rules. So that would also need to be tailored to whatever type of size of the county board that the county board goes. Terms of board members, right now, as you know, there's a structure of 2-4-4, 4-2-4, 4-4-2 for election cycles. Under analysis now from, I recently called yesterday, I modified our memo and sent it to all of our committee members. It does appear that there would be at least one member with 2 members in each 6 of the districts that would be up in each election cycle. Currently with 3 members, every member would be up the first cycle, and then there would either be 1 or 2 members from each district that's elected under our current structure. And this is just to wrap it up. The only other policy considerations that I saw looking in the Regional Institute from the report that was in the packet, obviously arguments in favor of keeping the 18-member structure. There's going to be more members to conduct constituent outreach. More members would possibly mean more areas of the county could be represented on the county board, potentially more diverse viewpoints and opinions on the wide array of issues that affects our county, which we have county board committees for: stormwater, JPS, et cetera. Arguments in favor of reducing the size of the county board. There would be initial savings in salaries and benefits associated with the decreased costs of reducing the county board, and potentially more competition among candidates vying for seats on the county board. I can also modify this PowerPoint to include any other arguments, both pro or con, that any of you have. So that concludes my PowerPoint.
Great, thank you, John. So I think now we can go ahead and open it up for discussion, whether it's questions or comments on the presentation that John gave, or just our own thoughts and comments, because I know many of us have been thinking about this. Member Ozog? You're muted still.
Okay, I just want to, I'm flipping back to an email that I sent member Selman yesterday. Just give me a second here, I got to pull it up. Where is it? Hang on just a minute. In my email, I talked about, I think what we need to do is a survey and ask each of our board members what they do. I'd be interested in knowing about time spent on meetings, both board committee and other county offices, how much time meeting preparation, constituent contact by phone, by email, per week, per month, community involvement, and then committee activity outside of meetings, meeting with county employees, various projects, emergency events, other events that may be related to the committee work. And I was thinking that this could be a compilation over perhaps the same 90-day period where everybody would look at what they did, for its example, say September, October, November of last year, or the last quarter of last year, and then give us an idea of the time commitment. And I think having that as a stepping off point, we'd have an idea of, I understand for all of us, the job is different. We make the job what we make it. But I think having some guideline about how much time we spend might be a good jumping off point to see what's feasible. And if it would be feasible to have 2 people doing the work of what is currently 3 people. We can't really talk about this unless we really know what the work is. We don't have a job description. I guess even employees of the county in a real nebulous, uncharted situation. Figure out what we discuss starting would be voluntary, but I think it would be in the best interest of the board in getting, really good feedback about this, to just tell us what each member does do. So that's my initial and major comment for today.
Thank you, Member Ozog. Any other discussion?
Thank you.
Some of y'all in the room maybe have some thoughts. Yeah, Member Hart, is your hand up?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I know it's difficult to see. Well, again, thank you for calling this meeting. I think there's still a couple of issues that I'd like to dive into a little bit more. And John, I don't know if it was on that last slide where you had some comparable counties to ours in population. I'd also like to look at what those counties do in terms of their job description. I know Member Healy mentioned that some of them have responsibilities for school districts, et cetera. But I'd like this committee to dive in a little bit more on the comparison angle, just so that we're comparing oranges to oranges, apples to apples. I do have some concern around shrinking the size of our board, knowing that each of our districts have over 150,000 people. And even though each of us may make this role our own, and everyone may treat it differently, to me, it all remains the same, that constituents need to have the proper amount of people that they can reach out to. And I don't know if that's a measure of how each of us treats our roles. When we're dealing with shrinking representation, I think we need to be very studious, and I think that's what this committee's here to do. So I look forward to diving into it a little bit more.
Sounds good. And I just shared my screen again to pull up. I have the just like the services departments that they have and provide. I can also send this I'll send this PowerPoint out to the working group as well.
That'd be great. And then one other thing too, I like the idea of collecting feedback from our fellow board members, but I think that's what each of us is here to do. We're the liaisons from the committee to the board, and I know that I'll continue to have discussions with my colleagues and get their thoughts on what they're actually doing. But I want to be sensitive to staff time as well, because I'm sure something that seems simple to us often requires a lot more time and work on the staff side. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just sort of respond and piggyback to that, and then I see Mary, you want to respond too, so I'll call on you next. As I was sort of thinking, I agree that it would be definitely worth us all talking to our own districts to sort of get that data. I was trying to think back how I would reconstruct my time if we were, because I agree that it makes sense to look pre-COVID if we're going to do this. And I was just thinking about how I would do going through my emails, and then how constituents will contact you, however, whatever address they've got, and that's of course okay, but it doesn't mean you have a clean inbox to monitor. And going through, I guess I'd have to go through my phone records, and if the opinion of it, certainly happy to. I just want to sort of echo it might not be quite as easy as just checking our inbox, but go ahead, Member Ozog. Oh, I think you might have just frozen. Okay, maybe, I know she's trying to fix it. I think her internet's being a little uncooperative this morning. But if it comes back, we'll go ahead and go to her. Were there any other questions on sort of the data that John laid out? Oh, Mary, you're muted, but we can see your video.
Okay, all right. No, in a response to Member Hart's comments, I really do think that if we're going to, the chairman has expressed that he wanted to do this for years to reduce the size of the board. What I'd like to see is a directive to come from the chairman in no way of meaning any offense to Chairman Salmon about this committee, but I think the chairman should ask everybody what they do and give us a snapshot within a month's time. You can look back on any, your calendar, meeting schedules, just check the length of our board meetings to know, and try to give an estimate of your time that you spend in general of preparation, et cetera. But to try to get some kind of a snapshot, I think is really important. Some of these are self-explanatory in terms of what other boards do. I understand some boards can even be in charge of school districts and all sorts of other responsibilities, but basically ours is our committee work and our constituent outreach. And I think that having some idea, and I think I can say with fairness that some of our committee chairmen have different responsibilities. Again, partly what you make of your committee chairmanship, but I think also in some cases, stormwater comes to mind, where you're at the beck and call of natural events. So that might be something that would be of interest. And I don't think it's sufficient for us to speak with our other colleagues. I'd like to see everybody submit something to the chairman and say, this is a snapshot of what I do. I think that's something that we need to do to figure out going forward if we are able to do this. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm not sure what the procedure then would be for going back to the chairman if you're asking to expand the scope of the working group.
It doesn't have to be through the chairman, but I assume it would be with the chairman's approval and expectation, because I'd like to see everyone respond. And what I'm talking about is an exercise that wouldn't take 30 minutes to just go back, look at your calendar. You did XYZ, you were at XYZ meetings, etc. It's not a big exercise. And before we would make any decisions about going to referendum, et cetera, I think we should have an idea of what the board does, both individually and as a whole.
Okay, Member Chaplin, you said you had your hand raised? You're muted though.
Thank you, Chairman Salmon. So, I'm sorry, I missed part of the slideshow presentation, but I know they had talked about committee structure, I think a little bit in there. So, I would like to see this committee, if we can, broaden the scope, whether we reduce the board or not, look into our committees and see if there's any that we can consolidate there, merge some of them, because we have all these committee meetings. We don't have enough time to spend in our committee meetings. We're always rushing out of environmental, we're rushing out of well, I know we're always rushing out of environments because I chair that. Sometimes health and human service, so there's not technology gets pushed back because of finance or county boards push back then because we ran too long with technology. So I'd like to see that if we can, maybe include that with this. And, I think there's a lot of good points made. I look at our state reps and their districts, which are sometimes a little bit smaller, but similar. And, they seem to handle the load, and we have a lot of layers of local government. We have our city councils, we have our townships, and we have our county boards, we have our school districts, our park districts, our libraries. We do have so many layers and so many elected officials. And then I look at our congressmen and, how large their districts are, and we have one. So I think, just putting all of it into perspective, and I know we want to do these surveys, and I know we want to, have a lot of information before we go forward with this, but I'm always one, and I think we have a very, very informed electorate. And I hope that, we will, the consensus of this committee will be to, whether we agree with, maybe we don't think we should downsize the board, but I hope that we would allow our electorate to have a say in that. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? Yep, Mr. Healy, go ahead.
I think the main important thing to ask of the people is, Chairman Tillman, you can give send a letter or an email to all the county board members, is to ask them how many constituent issues you handle a week.
Okay.
Because the rest of it is, whether you have 2 or 3 county board members, you're still working on every committee. You're supposed to be up to date on every issue. You're supposed to be doing it. So that's not the main thing. What I'm hearing mostly is how many constituent issues you have a week. And I'll be the first one to say, I've never had a week where I went over 3. I may have had 2 or 3 people call me on the same issue, but constituent issues, I think the most I have ever had in a week is 3. Most weeks are 0. Some weeks are 1. Some weeks are 2, but I've never had over 3 constituent issues. And as I have worked with, Sided Covert and others, what I've always recommended to younger county board members is the first thing they do is understand the issue, then pick up the phone and call staff, then turn it over to staff and ask them to keep you in the loop in terms of emails and stuff of that nature. So I think the main question to be asked is, how many constituent issues have you been given in the last quarter, in the last quarter? Actually, that's something you can do if you keep your emails. I keep every single email from the county. I've literally been yelled at by my IT guy at my law firm because I have so many emails, but almost all of them come from outside sources and things of that nature. But I could literally go through it and tell you in a month, and I have them separated by months and by year. I can literally tell you exactly how many constituent issues I had in a given month. And I think many county board members should be able to do that. I think we'd be surprised to find that as several other members have said, we have so many layers of government. We have people, city council, we have park district, we have stuff like that. And a lot of times I'll also state that a lot of my conversations have been, that's not a county issue. That is a city issue. Here's Patty Guston's number. Here's Mayor Cherico's number. Here's Mayor Irvin's number. And I turn it over to them because that's the proper way to do it. It's not us getting involved in those other issues. So I'd love to see how many constituent issues we handle on a monthly basis. Maybe my district needs less than any other district in the county. And that's why I have so few.
Thank you, Member Healy. If I just sort of want to add my own commentary there. I think in District 1, 3 constituent issues is probably a slow week for us, especially if thinking of the last, even before COVID, there were multiple issues that I was in contact with as either being constituents or mayors. And I think I maybe approach constituent work a little differently, and that's okay. We've all discussed how we make the job what we make it. I think it's my job to stay involved. I don't necessarily just hand stuff off to staff. I keep up with them, see how I can help. And I think that our involvement as elected officials is to direct staff, not to take direction from them. But I would get to, of course, all districts are different. I think probably half of ours are flooding half the time. Yeah, Member Healy, go ahead.
When I say you turn it over to staff, it doesn't mean you walk away from the issue. I've told all of my county board members who I've helped over the years and my seatmates, once you become involved, you keep a tickler in your system. And every Tuesday, you meet with that staff person and say, hey, where are we standing on this issue? And then they keep you informed. But the staff has a much better ability to approach it from several different angles. And that's what they're there for, is to do this. So please don't think that once I throw something over to a staff person, I go away. I don't.
Of course. Yeah, that's not how I meant it. Of course.
And if you get more than 3 a week, then you have an unusual district. It's much different than District 5.
Yeah.
District 5, on average, you're getting 3. Everybody knows me after 22 years. They give me a phone call. I move forward on it. So I'm going to guess that I get a majority of the calls and for District 5.
And then I think I remember Ozog, the hand up.
Yes. One of the more non-quantifiable reasons that I'd like to see the board reduced in size, quantifiable, the over $300,000 a year savings. But one of the issues I find, and I think that this is where my snapshot idea of everyone just looks at the same period, perhaps 6 weeks in the fall, October, or two months, October and November of 2019. Everyone looks at the same time period, and that way we can get an idea. But at least in my experience, this first 18 months on the board, I've found that sometimes I think the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And I think that a smaller board would be more nimble and more able to respond in a coordinated fashion. And you take this one, I'll take that one, et cetera, because a lot of times these issues are addressed to all 3 of the board members. So I think that the board in a smaller size could be more nimble and able to be more efficient in terms of handling constituent issues. I think as Member Chaplin discussed as well, I think we could definitely have a more efficient committee system where we could have less committees who meet longer and are able to do a more thorough job going through the issues that we're dealing with. Thank you.
So I have a list of some of the items we want to keep looking at. I think the surveying how fellow members are spending their time, I think we sort of need a consensus of the committee as to how we want to do that. Do we want each member to go back to their colleagues and gather that data, or no? Okay.
I would suggest you just send them an email.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would agree with Member Healy. Member Selman, I would support you maybe sending the rest of the board an email asking for their input. I don't know if we need a formal survey tool devised by staff.
No.
Okay. All right. So John and I will follow up on that then, and we'll devise something to get sent out this week.
And make it, and I'm sorry, members, Chairman Selman. I really think it's important to make it a snapshot, that you don't go through the last 18 months or whatever.
Oh, no, of course not. Yeah.
Maybe the third quarter or the fourth quarter of 2019 or something like that.
Okay.
And I think it would be good, both looking at meeting attendance and try to get a feel for how much time people prepare for the meetings as well. And that may be different depending on the board members if they care to share. And also looking at the constituent contact in particular.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you. So John and I will talk about that, sort of what we can do with he's only one human with only so many hours in the day. Member Rutledge, I think your hand is up.
Thanks, Member Selman. So I really think that we need to take a look at committees going into this first, because if we're going to cut our board size by a third, that puts a much bigger burden on the remaining members if we can keep the committee structure as it is. So for me, that would be the first thing to look at. A couple other points that I want to make is, yes, we'd save the $312,000 a year if we cut our board by a third, but I can't imagine those remaining 12 okay with doing the work they're doing for the same pay, but getting a third more responsibility. So I think that that's something that we should consider. Yes, we would save money, but I think that a greater burden on those remaining board members would ultimately end up with a pay raise. So I'm not sure how much that would save over time. And again, the committee posts on the remaining members, we have to take a look at committees first, I think, and restructure that before we consider whether or not we are going to reduce the number of board members. And I think that, you know, taking a third of the board members away kind of lops off a whole bunch of institutional knowledge that the board members currently have and accessibility to the constituents. And so those are things that I think we should look at as well.
Thank you, Member Rutledge. I wanted to sort of comment and bring up the pay issue. I think especially as we're looking at our budget for 2021 and if not 2022, we all recognize that our budget is going to be heavily impacted. And, you know, I think I would agree with you that if we already all admit that the committee schedule is pretty burdensome on Tuesdays, if we added a third of that to jobs that are already part-time, but I think all of us could say we've been well over part-time at least the last 3 months. I would agree that we have to start talking about compensation. When you look at some of our peers who are making much more than us, I think that would not be in the realm of what would be realistic for what we should be compensated. But I think it's a hard sell. And I just don't want to, as I've said before, make our positions in our government a race to the bottom of the lowest paid benefits, the lowest paid salaries, because I think you get the lowest quality elected officials that way. Member Hart, I think Hart, Healy, Chaplin, and then Mary, is your arm up too? All right, let's go with Member Hart first. Okay.
Thank you, Member Selman. Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point that Member Rutledge and Member Selman, you guys articulated quite well. You know, the one thing I think this committee should understand though is, and I'm a big proponent of cost savings and efficiency, perhaps more than, you know, or as equal to many people on this board, but you know, 300,000 in cost savings sounds like a lot, but we have to really factor about what the true cost is of reducing representation for our constituents. And that's something that's not easily quantifiable. So I think we need to keep that in the back of our minds as we go through this process. The other thing I wanted to mention, there's been a lot of discussion as when we reach out to our colleagues about, you know, how many constituents reach out to them or how many committees they're serving on. But I think what that loses, I think those are important inputs, but there's also another input that we haven't discussed is, which is how proactive our board members being at reaching out to their community members to find what issues are out there that aren't necessarily being emailed to us, because I personally think that's a big part of the job. It's our job to be proactive. So as we think about what our roles and responsibilities are and, you know, what the burden is in terms of the amount of board members on this body, let's also remember proactivity and making sure that we're, you know, giving enough people opportunities to, you know, hear from us directly.
Thank you, Member Hart. If anyone's not speaking, if they could mute their line, I just think we had a little feedback. Quickly, before I go to Member Healy, I want to reiterate that I think is an area where a lot of my constituent work is. I proactively am reaching out and monitoring conversations to make sure when someone sort of has the general, I don't know who to deal with this zoning thing, but I have a problem, I make sure to reach out and help them navigate that. So I would agree. Next on my list, I think I have Member Healy.
I mean, what a lot of people leave and don't remember is, because you weren't on the board at the time, is that we used to also be the Forest Preserve District. And it's one of the last two that were on the Forest Preserve District and the county. Jimmy and I, Zay and I were the last two. Every Tuesday morning from like 7 in the morning till noon, 1 o'clock was county. Every Thursday from 7 in the morning to 12, 1 o'clock. And if you were on the committee regarding purchasing a property, you actually spent the entire day at the Forest Preserve. And we got paid less. And our constituent calls were actually probably 2 or 3 times on the forest preserve what we had at the county. So the forest preserve was much more. Also, I would think that there are very few members of the board who do more than myself in terms of reaching out to the community. I serve on, I don't know how many charitable things, as well as how many, other governmental things. I'm constantly talking with my, my mayor, city councilman, stuff like that, constituents, homeowner association, giving speeches, the Lions clubs, all the rest of those organizations and everything else. But yet, for 22 years, I've been able to manage to do it. And 2 of those years were spent also doing the forest preserve at the exact same time. So it's all how you budget your time and how you move forward. I think one of the most important things is going to be, what are your constituent calls? Because everything else is just something you should actually be doing anyways, whether there are 2 of you, 3 of you, 4 of you, 5 of you. You should be involved in every single issue that's coming before the board. So that's not going to change. What will change is the number of constituent calls. And the way the vast majority of them right now are handled in District 5, at least, is they send it to all 3 of us. And for some reason, I'm always on my computer. I don't know why. Probably because I'm in a law firm and I'm constantly in front of the screen. As soon as I get it, I immediately recontact the person. I let my seatmates know that I'll handle the issue, and I will keep them informed. I call staff, talk to them, shoot them the email, and then they constantly follow up every Tuesday, and I keep my seatmates up to date. I think the most important thing is going to be how many constituents contacts you get in a week period. And by contacts, I don't mean things where you go, yeah, it's great, it's about Nike Park, but Nike Park is run by the neighborhood park. Here's Ray McCurry's phone. That's a constituent contact, but that's something you handled it about. I'm talking about actual constituent contacts that you more where you're involved.
Member Healy, I think if you can maybe scoot your chair a little bit closer, you're just cutting out a little bit, and I missed the very end.
You're asking me to scoot my chair?
I think, well, maybe just louder. That was much clearer than the end.
I love scooting chairs. Here we do the crab crawl. We come over. Connor's going, oh God, you can't wait till you get rid of him in 3 months.
You want to just repeat the end of your comments there, because they were getting a little cut out.
It was that we're talking about, stop laughing. What I'm talking about is contact with the public that is more than just 5 seconds, because I get a lot of phone calls where someone calls me up and goes, Healy, who handles, and then they tell me an issue and I go, yeah, here, call Ray McGurry, his phone number is this, or call Patty Guston, or call Doug Krieger, or call Mayor Urban, or call somebody else. I mean, those are things that's 30 seconds. And whether it's myself or whether there's 20 of us or 1 of us, that's not really a constituent issue per se. Constituent issue is something that involves your district. You're actively involved in it with staff, and it's something you're going forward. So I think that's why maybe, we only have 3 of those roughly a week, most on average in District 5.
All right, thank you. I think that's helpful. Next on my list, I have Member Chaplin, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So, yeah, just a couple of things. As far as, in 2022, all the board seats are up. So as far as institutional knowledge goes, we could all be gone in 2022. So, the voters determine that, and not all board members will maybe be running again in 2022. Some of the board members that maybe are, have been on the board a little bit longer may not even be interested. So, the institutional knowledge, I don't think that really has an impact on the size of the board at all. Peers getting paid, I think Jim made a good point. Most county board members in other counties also serve as their forest preserve district representatives. And I know that we're the highest paid out of all the Collier counties. So, that we're right now we're the highest paid. And as far as doing more work, if we're down to 2 boards and people not wanting to do that, well, then you don't have to run for the job. I mean, I don't think you have if you're an elected official, you say, well, they used to have 3 board members, now they have 2, I'm demanding more money. I don't think that's how it works. And secondly, and I think Sean will agree and the other board members will agree, sometimes I'm sure Sean will take care of an issue without Pete and I involved, and sometimes I take care of something and, Sean and Pete aren't involved. So, I guess it's just who sometimes gets that email first, or, you know, I deal more with people in Lisle because I live closer to Lisle, and I think maybe Pete and Sean might do a little bit more in Elmhurst because they're out there, but I do a lot in Elmhurst too. But I also think that if there's 1 or 2 board members, you know, it's not really that much more of a, you know, workload for them. And again, I'm going to just say, I think we have a very well-informed constituency, and I think that they really, I think we should leave the question to them and ultimately let them put it to a referendum and let our constituents decide.
Thank you. And Member Ozog is next. You're muted, Member Ozog.
You're muted.
Right.
Okay.
In terms of what we're looking at here, obviously, since I brought this forward in the beginning, you all know that I'm in favor of doing this. And I think we have an opportunity here to really do a major consolidation of government, which this ACT initiative that the chairman has been a proponent of for many years it has been touting for so long. This is a really major issue as opposed to a mosquito abatement or some other minor folding in of one group upon another. This is a major savings. And going forward, over $300,000 a year. And on top of that, as I've said, it would make the board more nimble. But the other thing that we could consider when we talk about committee assignments, I mean, let's be honest here. And I've been on a board, I'm in my 10th year of being on public boards. The staff does all of the work. It's my job to review what the staff is bringing forward, to understand it, and to ask questions. And if we really wanted to make this a part-time job, we have the power to make this job meet at 5 or 6 o'clock on a Tuesday evening every single week. And for the pay that we're making, we could do that. And in terms of how long it would go, et cetera, you'd either get more efficient, or you might have situations like I had on my first year on the Glenbard board. In 2011, 2012, we were in a budget financial crunch. We were hiring a new superintendent, and we negotiated a school contract. I never left a meeting that first year on the board before 1 a.m. because that was the work that we had to do, and that was the time that we met every other Monday evening. So sometimes if you want to make this a job where you do have your days and it's full time, you do something about the Tuesdays, and you make a point of having it a job where people do not have to be off every Tuesday. I had to refuse a job a few months before the election in 2018 because I couldn't take that job. I couldn't have said to them, I can't be there every Tuesday. So there are some trade-offs here and some discussion to be had, but I think that we could do committee consolidation for sure. I think that we could become more efficient, and we could save the taxpayers a lot of money. I really, really hope that we will be able to conclude that this needs to go in front of our constituents who, as Member Chaplin points out, are very well informed. And this issue is out there now. It's in the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Ozog. And I did see some hands, but quickly before we do that, the issue of meetings being in evenings is one that I know I've been interested in, and Member Hart, I think, has had some interest in. The problem that I've had it explained to me is the overtime cost for staff, because we've had, obviously there's so many staff members, but I do wonder if our technology improvements could make that a much lower cost. It would be certainly something I'd be interested in. I think I talk quite publicly when you're 30 years old and trying to get a job, but say, oh, I can't work Tuesdays, that's the conversation's done then. And I think that if we want public officials with a variety of experience that aren't just, we don't want to race the qualifications to the lowest bottom of the barrel. We don't want the lowest pay, at least in my opinion. We don't want the lowest pay. We don't want to cut benefits, and we don't want to make it so only the wealthiest and those with the freest of time can serve. I want teachers to be able to take some time off and serve their county. I want parents to be able to serve their county who have young children. And whether that's not saying that the 2-person thing is exclusive of that, but that is certainly something I look at. Member Healy,
Member Salmon, can I just
Member
add
Healy was up next. Sure, go ahead, Member. Go ahead, Member Ozog.
I just want to add to your point about overtime. I really don't believe overtime is an issue because the vast majority of our staff who we encounter during these meetings are salary. And if I understand, salary would be earning time off. And in the school board, on the Glenbard district, every single person is from our board secretary, et cetera, who is part of putting these meetings on, they were off the next day until I think they came into work at 1 o'clock. So that was an easy fix, that they just didn't come in on Tuesday mornings. And I think that that is an easy way to solve that situation. I don't believe there really is an overtime issue. I think it's just a decision that would be made and would offer an awful lot. And on top of that, our constituents would be able to come to these meetings and participate. But again, we are also in a very strange time with technology, et cetera. So, but thank you. Sorry, Member Healy. Thank you.
Member Healy, go ahead, please.
Okay, Brian, I tried to kick it over to you, but I'll go first. First of all, one of the main reasons that we don't have meetings in the evenings and stuff like that is that we are multi-jurisdictional. Almost every other government entity is single jurisdictional. We're multi-jurisdictional. And what I mean by that is within my district, I have multiple cities, I have multiple townships, I have multiple school districts, I have all different types of governmental entities. Therefore, it is more difficult for them to come to night meetings at the county when issues are regarding their city or their county or their township or their park district or whatever. And it is more difficult for them to attend. And you're also then telling people in your district, you have a choice. You can either go to the city council meeting that night or the county board meeting. So because we are multi-jurisdictional, we've always been during the day. Now, rural counties who have very small numbers of municipalities, they tend to have their meetings at night because there's not that conflict. There's 1 or 2 cities, they're able to work it out. And finally, we've tried night meetings to increase the number of people to the meeting. It never happened. They never showed up. In fact, less people came to the meetings at night. And a lot of that was because on Tuesday night, you have your city council meeting, your park district, your library board, and people are active like that tend to go to those much more local ones there. So that is the reason we've always stayed during the day.
Member Krajewski, you're next. You're muted, I think.
Yeah, I'm getting off mute.
There you go.
Thank you, Chairman. And I apologize if this member Healy has already covered this, but there's been a lot of talk about committee assignments and the history of the committees. Just before I got there on 2010, Chairman Schillerstrom was trying to get members more money. So they gave $3,000 to every chairman, additional compensation. Every vice chair of a committee got $1,500. So they created all kinds of committees in order to get board members the additional pay. Then a majority of the board members didn't think that was right. Boards changed over. They eliminated all the stipends for chairmen and vice chairmen, but kept all these committees. So there was an awful lot of committees. Go back into some of Jim's days, he could tell you there was a lot less committees. That's where we should get back to. There's no reason to have public transit and transportation. There's several committees, but they were created back when a prior chairman was getting more compensation to board members by giving chairs stipends and vice chair stipends. And so again, I think that the committees can get easily back to fewer, so it doesn't really matter how many members we have. And then just from experience, I spent 8 years as a mayor of Village Downers Grove, 10 years as a board member of DuPage County. The constituent issues that come up are night and day. When I was mayor, is a lot of constituent issues. As a county board member, very, very few constituent issues. The majority of the time is spent, whether you have 1 member, 2 members, or 3 members in a district, the majority of the time is spent with your committees, your information, setting policies over countywide. And if you are a chairman of a committee, I've chaired different committees in my 10 years, that's where a bulk of my time is spent working with staff on that committee, depending what committees, some are more than others. But the constituent outreach, very, very little for a county board member compared to your local municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Krajewski. And then Member Ozog.
To follow up on Member Krajewski's point, that's an interesting story about the number of committees. And I'd be willing to consider if we went to a situation with only 4 committees, let's say, and we'd done a good share of consolidation, perhaps the chairman of a committee should be compensated if there's a great deal of work that is required for instance, public works or, stormwater. I can see where that could be a possibility depending on the responsibilities if we do consolidate. So that's something to lay on the table as well. But I think the major issue we need right now is to find out from everybody what they're actually doing right now. And I think that would be the jumping off point. Thank you.
Member Haley, did you have another, or you just?
Yeah, just quickly, it actually wasn't Bob Schillerstrom was pushing it was Bill Mayo and Linda Kurzweil. They felt that, chairmans needed to be compensated higher. And anybody who knows Bill Mayo knows you didn't really vote against those things for fear of your life sometimes. Also, something you had said earlier about people, teachers and stuff like that. We've actually had teachers on the county board before. Bob Schroeder in my district was a teacher for many years while he was a county board member. He literally took Tuesday mornings off, and the way they adjusted his schedule at the school and everything else, it made it available for him to do that. He wasn't as involved in the forest preserve, so it was a little bit easier for him to get in and out on that. Obviously, it's not easy to make that schedule, but then you don't have to run for the office if there's a problem there. And we've had some great people over the years on the county board.
All right, so I want to sort of, because we're reaching an hour here, so I want to sort of get a summary of the items we want to do as a follow-up. So I think first, I think everyone on this board probably agrees that we want less committees in our lives. I think the question though is probably whether or not it fits into the scope of this working group. So I think that's a question we'll follow up on. John and I are going to work on getting an email out to members to survey how they're spending their time. And then I don't have, or Member Hart, you had wanted a comparison of job roles as a way to sort of look at how we compare the other boards. So like, if we're looking at Hennepin County, are they running schools in forests or are they similar to ours?
And just to add to that, Member Solomon, I think for our next meeting, when that happens, John, maybe we could just do a little bit of a mini presentation or a deep dive on that slide for some like-minded or similar counties to us in terms of population. Sure. Thank you. If that's good with you, Chairman Solomon.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So I think that gives good direction of what information we need going forward. The other part that I wanted to get out of today's conversation was our schedule. So in order to be done by the 31st, I'm proposing that we meet again on the 7th to sort of review. I think it sounds like we'll be talking about our peer counties. We'll see how much survey data we can get back. I think it might be a little hard to get the data back by the 7th because of the holiday, but we can try. So having the meeting on the 7th be, here's all the data we have now, let's see the direction we want to go. And then meeting on the 21st to all sort of agree on what our final report will be. And I know we're still getting a little bit of clarification, John and Connor, about what format that report needs to be in, but we'll have that plenty of time before the 21st. So is there any objection to meeting again on the 7th, sort of to regroup with all the data that we're requesting, and then on the 21st is our sort of gather all our ducks in the row, we're ready to deliver to the chairman? Does that sound good to everybody?
Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so if there's not anything else for discussion today, anybody?
Move to adjourn.
Yeah, so without objection, then we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Take over anything?